Welcome to my podcast, Shaping Your Journey. My name is Aldo Matza, percussionist, drummer, and artistic director of Kosa Music, inviting you to join in on conversations with friends, artists, professionals, and experts in our music world. Today, I have the incredible opportunity to talk to someone who has been involved in the music industry, well, in many ways, and I'll let him walk us through a little bit of that. Please, Dave Black. It's so nice
Ah,
to have you on the
oh, it's so
show.
nice to be here. Thank you for having me on your show. I'm looking
And it,
forward to this.
yeah, and it's interesting because we don't often have a chance to. I mean, you and I have crossed paths a million times, specifically when I was doing my book, especially, which I have to thank you for being such a great part of it. The Cuban Rhythms for Percussion and Drum Set, which, by the way, is now being used in Cuba in their
That's
music,
awesome.
yeah, in their music conservatories. So that was quite an honor. But you were a big help in shaping that particular journey for me, which
Mhm.
was nice.
That was a
But
pleasure. It's a great book, and I had a lot of fun working with you.
yeah, thank you. But before we talk about like your specific journey, your trajectory, take us back to that very beginning. Like, what was that thing that first started it for you? Like, most of us, or people even who know you well, may not know where it actually started. That seed, that first spark.
Well, that first spark actually started in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where we were living at the time. My dad was born and raised there, so half of our family was there. And I remember very vividly, in the square, they'd have the Fourth of July parades and stuff. And I remember in second grade, that marching line going by and that row of drummers passing, and just like, oh my God, that power, that strength, or whatever, just was amazing. And I kind of knew that that's what I wanted to do at that point. That drums was the instrument that I loved music and stuff, but in the second grade, we really couldn't afford drums at that time. I had three younger brothers and sisters as well. So to get started, I remember buying a guitar with the money I had gotten from my first Holy Communion. And that's what started me on my journey. For 3 years, I studied guitar. And then in the fifth grade, we got uh, um, a drum. And then I was able to play with the elementary school concert band. And actually, when I think back on it now, I'm grateful for the 3 years of guitar because it taught me chords and melody and how to read traditional music rather than just rhythms. And so I think it was a great base to start for what was to come down the line for me.
Right, right. That's interesting. And you're in fifth grade. That's really early, but that's nice that you realize that because when people ask me, for example, like I want to take some drum lessons and or my son or my daughter, and what else should we do? I said, well, the first thing you should do is take piano lessons at the same time.
Right.
Because it's so important to be a musical drummer, to know about music, and to be another musician, not just the old traditional way of doing things or thinking about things, right?
Well, and when we get more into my journey, I mean, it branches out into music composition, which is also another form of income and everything else. So it kind of all ties in. But I love that and whatever. And then when I majored in school at Cal State Northridge, even a percussion major had to take 1 year of piano. I had to play the Bach Convention number 1 at the end. And I remember thinking at the time, I'm a percussion major. Why am I having to take a year of piano and play the Bach Convention number 1? But again, in retrospect, it was a wonderful gift.
Sure, sure. And they still, I mean, in university, I remember having the same thing, but I had no training, and boy, did I work hard. And
Yeah.
then I realized, of course, the value of it because I was studying classical percussion at the time. I was a rock drummer who went to
Hmm.
classical and jazz. I wanted to do it all, but then I had to also do this, and that was a rude awakening, but it was a good one, and I really took the challenge because I understood. Sometimes when you're younger, you don't understand, but
Right.
I really got it. Yes.
Yeah.
And you studied composition afterwards or at the university?
My minor was composition. My major was percussion, and my minor was composition.
All right.
Uh,
Yeah, so you want to, I mean, I have questions about because you've had a lot of compositions that were used in different contexts, of course, but the fill in that gap as a teenager going into university that kind of led you that way. Who was responsible? What inspired you to get serious about it?
Louie Bellson, 2 words. And that was, he was a godsend. And that started when I was in high school, in my junior year of high school in 1976. And, we had a jazz band called the Bowie High School Starliners that was kind of a part of the school, but not part of the day to day curriculum. It was an outside jazz band that did gigs and stuff, but did major jazz festivals. And Joe Carley, who was the director of that, was a jazz musician. His son Dale Carley played trumpet in high school and went on to play trumpet for Count Basie's band. But Joe Carley also had his own publishing company called Creative Jazz Composers. So he was publishing Louie Bellson charts, Irby Green, Clark Terry, and so on. And so these kind of people would be the guest artists at, the end of the year concert where, it was a huge event, and one or two of those people would be the guest artists. And that year, which ended up being the last year of the Starliners, it was Louie Bellson. And Joe Carley said to Louie, he said, do you want to stay with the kid drummer, or do you want us to get you a hotel? And he said, no, I want to stay with the kid drummer. And that in itself said a lot about the man, because this was for 3 days, a family of six in a small house with, 3 or 4 bedrooms or whatever. He's never met me before, never met anybody. He says, no, I want to stay with the kid drummer and his family. And he was amazing. He would sit in the back, insist on sitting in the back seat with my little brothers and sisters. I mean, he was just as gracious as ever. And during that concert, we played a couple of tunes together. I was 16 at the time, and I think he, liked what he saw, and we kept in touch. He wrote us a letter right away thanking us for our hospitality, and you know complimenting me and what a nice pleasure it was to meet you. And we thought, okay, everybody kind of does that. That's an obligatory thing. He's just being nice. And we started writing back and forth, and he always responded with a letter. And then we started talking and stuff. And he ended up writing a letter of recommendation for me for both North Texas State and University of Miami, which were going to be my two choices. But when he stayed at our house and we got to know each other and play together and stuff, he said, why don't you come out to California? They have a great jazz program, Joel Leach and Cal State Northridge. He says, I live in Northridge. He says, you can study with me, we can hang out and all that kind of stuff. And so I made a complete about face in my senior year and took a leap of faith and moved to California. And everything he promised and said was exactly true. And so, going back to your original question, I mean, he was obviously a world phenomenal drummer, but he also composed. I mean, a lot of the things that we did, the drum battle stuff, Louis Rides Again, the Hawk, all those things, whatever. And I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. Here's a really well-known drummer who's also a well-known writer and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, I want to do that too, kind of thing. And that's where that started. That balance between being an author, which he was as well, being a composer and being a drummer, and trying to make it all work.
Yeah, and he was, I mean, he was amazing. I had the opportunity to meet him once because I used to go to the National Stage Band camps and the Jamie Earl Abersole camps. I mean, I used to go to every camp that moved.
Mhm.
And he came once to play with his big band, and I remember being so blown away, for lack of a better word, of first of all his musicality in the band. I mean, he was playing like a an orchestral player, bringing the band down
Mhm.
nuances that I'd never heard before in a big band because they're always loud.
Right.
And he'd be bringing them down with intensity, and I had never seen that before. So I just said, I've never seen like that kind of control and musical respect for the music, and it was like three-dimensional, and his technique, his musicality, was just incredible. And
Yeah.
then I got to meet him afterwards, in the camp situation.
Right.
Such an inspirational person, man. You are so lucky. He was
Well,
amazing.
yeah, the luck was just I mean, I think back on it now, I mean, he gave me so many opportunities. I mean, not only did we end up writing together, we had our own stage band series with Barnhouse, but because I didn't have a car in college and stuff, he put me to work as one of his copyists and stuff. And we went out and got a pen and stuff. And so he would pay me to copy charts out on onion skin from his score. So not only was I learning that way, but he was also providing me some kind of income as a college student who didn't have the ability to, have a second job. But because he lived so close, I mean, it was so funny. I think about it now and laugh. I mean, at the time he had two cars. The first one was an orange Corvette, and he would pull up to the dorms, and he'd be waiting there, and I'd walk out the door, and all the students would be looking, going, "Holy moly!" kind of thing. And then he had a 280Z, but he took me to every one of his gigs and recording sessions. So I was on a lot of those Pablo gigs where I was at the Sarah Vaughan recording sessions and the Oscar Peterson, and he introduced me to Count Basie and to Ella Fitzgerald and to all these people because I was always hanging out with him and going to the recording sessions or hanging out with him at Disneyland when his band was playing. So he really he took such great care of me and stuff. And of course, the story ends. As a lifelong friendship. And then, I was in the second wedding party for him, and I was one of the six pallbearers at his funeral. So our story and everything took an absolute full circle. I mean, from the time I was 16 years old till when he passed in, I forget, 1994 or something like that.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, he was always so inspirational, and also very helpful in every way. I remember him saying, a couple of things that always stuck with me. If you don't have something good to say, you don't
Mhm.
say
Right.
and never have any negative thoughts in your mind. Just like chase them out, and don't
Mhm.
say anything bad about anybody, because anything you might think about somebody is a temporary anyway, and it's just, we all do some weird things sometimes, but always see the good in people and help them out, and he was like that, right? I mean,
He
I got
was.
to see a little bit of him, but
And you'd see him at a convention or whatever, and he would never say, "Okay, I've signed enough," or whatever. He would stop and smile and talk and sign everything until the very last person, got their things signed or whatever. And it's funny. I look back because there was sometimes that was a little bit annoying in that, we had to be someplace by a certain time, or we had to get him to the next place or whatever. And he'd sit there and talk and tell these long stories. It's like, Louie, we gotta go, we gotta go, we gotta go, kind of thing. That was Louis. That was the beautiful thing about him.
yeah,
And I think it showed very much in not only his writing, but his playing for sure.
sure.
Yeah.
Oh yes, and I mean, he was leading his own band with Pearl Bailey, right?
Yes,
Big band. But Ed Shaughnessy, did you also study with Ed?
I did. I
Okay.
studied with Louis, with Ed, with Steve Schaefer, and with God, now it's um, the person who with the Tijuana Brass.
Oh yeah, I know who you mean. Wow, he was a great drummer. I remember him. I
He's
remember
a,
seeing my
was a
kid.
huh?
I remember when I was a kid, I saw Tijuana Brass.
Yeah. What? Oh my God! I can't believe that. You'll have to look at my bio and stuff, but yeah, those were my 3 or 4 primary, teachers, and I was in heaven. I was extremely lucky.
No, of course. And then
Nick
being
Ciroli, Nick Ciroli is the drummer.
oh, right, right. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah,
So it was, yeah, Louie, Ed Shaughnessy, Steve Schaefer, and Nick Ciroli.
yeah.
Yeah.
All of them great. I mean, Ed
Yeah.
Shaughnessy was at COSA a number of times, and I got to work with him a lot. He's another one of those who just
Hmm.
gave, and he's such a phenomenal player that he was the eternal student at the same time, you
Yes.
know, which was nice to see.
Yeah, I mean, as you know from knowing Ed or whatever, it never really just stopped with the drum set. He was into Indian rhythms and how to apply that to the drum set, and the body percussion and the playing with the hands and stuff. I mean, they those guys, but those that's what makes those musicians or musicians in general stand out above the rest or whatever is because they do broaden their horizons. They're looking more than just to get great chops or to learn one instrument. Their idea is to incorporate and to learn as many styles and many genres of music as you can get, which
Right.
made them really, really well-rounded musicians.
And people at the same time. I remember you just made me remember this one instance where when he was at COSA, we would have like 6, 7 classes going on simultaneously and at different levels, and they're all small classes. And
Mhm.
there was one participant who was there who came to me later on one particular day, and he was just in like in a electrified because he says, Aldo, like the weirdest thing just happened to me today. I went to a class with Ed Shaughnessy was giving the class, and of course, we're all sitting in the class and playing. It was a 90-minute class, and it was fantastic. Now he says I'm not a great drum set player, but I really wanted to learn drum set. But his instrument was playing tar and frame drums. So
Mhm.
the next class that he was going to was a class with Glenn Velez.
Ah,
So Ed Shaughnessy they walk along, and Ed sits in the class, because everybody was going to each other's classes all the time. And this student says, I thought that was pretty cool that, Ed Shaughnessy being who he is, he didn't just go back to his room or whatever. He came and was listening to other people hanging out. But the thing that blew my mind, he says, was I'm standing there and Ed had not played a lot of frame drums. So he was asking me to show him what what Glenn Velez was doing, and can you explain that a little bit better after the class? He says I couldn't believe that Ed Shaughnessy's asking me, and he's like, as if like he was the student at that moment.
of course.
And yes, and so that just that alone, that idea that you're not just like now you're the professional, you know everything. Well, we don't know everything, but we're
Right.
certainly open to get more information up there to maintain our level of musicality, our level of humanship, for lack of a better word. So
I
that
mean,
was
it also humanizes them, doesn't it? We have this image of them being up on this pedestal, and
yes,
we realize that they're students just like everybody else, and they want to learn. And yes, they've reached a certain level, but you never stop learning or studying.
yeah, yeah,
And so
definitely,
you're right. It's an amazing thing to see that at that level.
yeah. And then that was amazing just to watch. I forget who the student was, but it was just his face was in like a
Mhm.
discovery, and I thought that was
Yeah.
the most beautiful thing. Another question I wanted to ask you is I've known you for years at Alfred because you were heading the
Mhm.
percussion, drum and percussion area for a long time. But you had been there for many years, and you were responsible for putting a lot of publications on the table and out in the market. including my own, by the way. So I again, I thank you for that one. But
Oh, it was a pleasure.
the tell us about, like, how did that come about, that you went in from the composer, the drummer, the percussionist, and arranger into working for a publication company?
Well, that's a great question, and the answer is again, everything seems to tie back to Louie Bellson. You know, I had been studying composition and had been writing some big band stuff. And Louis' trombonist, Nick DeMeo, was his not only his trombone player, but was his manager. And so I got to know Nick quite well over the years because of hanging out with the band and stuff. And when Nick passed away, I sat down and I wrote a jazz band tune, a ballad called Nick, and dedicated it to him. And this was before I ever was knew I would work at Alfred. Alfred Publishing at that time was publishing stage band or jazz band publications. So this was in 1980, and Louis knew Sandy Feldstein and said, I think you should try and get this published. So we made an appointment, and Louie Bellson walked in with me to Alfred Music to meet in the conference room with Sandy Feldstein and John O'Reilly, who was the editor in chief. And he says, "This is my friend Dave. He's written this jazz band composition. My band has played it a couple of times. I think it's good. I think you should give it a listen and consider publishing it." And they did. That came out in 1981. That was my very first publication. And it was because he walked in and said, "Here's this young kid, I think has got something, that you may like." And that's kind of where it started. That was long before I even knew I was going to be working for Alfred. Then, I continued to play out on the road and, work on composition and stuff. And then when I got tired of being on the road, I thought, okay, what can I do in town, kind of thing, because you know how it is when you're in town for a while and you work and then you go out of town, you come back and nobody's ringing your phone because they don't know whether you're going to go back out on the road again or not. And so I thought, okay, I need to find something to anchor me while I concentrate on making a living here. And Joel Leach uh, sent me an email one afternoon and said, Jay Wanamaker was working at Alfred Music at the time. And Joel says, "I understand Jay is leaving and going to work for Yamaha back east." He says, "You may want to inquire about that opening." And so I did. And I got the position. It was in marketing at that time. But I knew that once my foot was in the door, I could kind of maneuver my way into an area that I wanted. And so I started at Alfred in May of 1985, and immediately Sandy said, "We have this brush book that Louis has written that we want to publish, but we kind of engraved the music, but nobody can figure out how to make the book work or what to do to put it all together. Would you mind taking a look at it?" So I started May 3rd of 1985, and this was probably at the end of May in June. So I took all the material and stuff, and I came up with a game plan, along with Joel. I came up with the clock concept of, swishing this way and this way, whatever. I also added the whole brush special effects section and um, the Latin section. And so it became co-authored by Louie Bellson, Hank Bellson, and I. And that book, from May to June or July, was put in production and introduced that November at the PAS convention at Universal Hilton in Studio City. And that started my career in the percussion part and the editorial part. Then it was after that Sandy the next year said, "I've always wanted to, write a beginning drum book to take the Haskell horror book off the market." he said, "Would you be interested in co-authoring that with me?" And I said, "Sure." And so we went, about with, what should be included. We had a group of teachers that we collected to kind of bounce things off of and whatever. And we wrote that book in about a year, and that was introduced in 1987. And kind of that was the start. That was history in the making and stuff. And then we ended up doing book two and the drum set method, and he ended up going to CPP Bell and Warner Brothers,
Right.
and I took over that position from there on as the percussion editor and the executive vice president. So,
Well, Sandy was another one of those people who opened doors and helped with a lot of people. He was a very, very smart man. I got to know him, and in fact, I'm not sure if you know this. When we did our video series, um, lessons, with the greats at COSA, I had Sandy be on the board, like I filter it through him. I said it goes to him first, and then
mhm,
he says, what should be changed, what should be done, because we were filming that whole week at COSA, all these master classes and
mhm,
performances according to the design that I had. But I said I don't have any experience in doing an instructional video because we were doing this. We were producing it and in collaboration with Hudson Music at the time.
mhm.
I said, Sandy would be the guy that has to look through this. That's the filter. And unfortunately, it was the year he passed. So we
Yeah,
dedicated that project to him, actually.
that's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Sandy was another um, mentor in that he was not only just a drummer, but he wrote a lot of concert band pieces and jazz band pieces and stuff. So here now I'm surrounded by drummers who majored in percussion or taught percussion or who played full-time percussion, but who were also writing books and also writing compositions and stuff. And I thought, wow, what a novel concept to be able to merge three of those things and whatever in order to cultivate an entirely second income.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. And you did that so well. I mean, you brought it to a whole other level, of course, because you brought in so many other authors, some great players who had great ideas, but needed some guidance in how to
Yep.
direct this, correct, so that people would understand it.
Right. Plus, we ended up getting, stick control and buying progressive steps for the modern drummer. I mean, all of those things made it really the largest percussion catalog in the world at that time, or it still is. I mean, I would think just because you have the stick control, the modern drummer, you've got the CPP Bellwin catalog, you got the Warner Brother catalog, you got the Alfred catalog. That was such a fun period of time because you had the greatest books there and you got to work with the greatest people, and it was just the energy level was so fun, and it was so fun to come to work every day and work with everybody and see it to fruition and stuff. It was just fantastic.
Yeah. It was also a great team too, because I had the pleasure of working with some of the guys. Before the whole COVID thing that kind of changed
Yeah.
the course of history a little somewhat.
Yeah,
But
I think it did change the course of history for sure.
yes. But since then, now, I mean, now you're no longer at Alfred, of course, but you've gone on I mean, continue composing, continue. I mean, I won't put words in your mouth because I know where you went. Some of the things where you've gone, like the drumming, uh, the drums, tamburo, for
Right,
example. And
right.
what are some of the other things you've been doing since?
Well, I mean, the funny thing is you never know where one thing is going to lead to another, and that's the wonderful thing about life, I think, and about music, is that sometimes we have to just learn to sit back and let things go where they go. Let karma go where they go. Let the energy go where it goes, or whatever, because it usually always ends up okay. So when I left Alfred, and I was there for 35 years, so that's a long time, and the music business was changing with all the digital stuff, and all that's fine, but um, I thought, well, let me just kind of relax and stuff and see kind of where things go. But immediately things started opening up. I mean, I got a call from a friend at Chapman University who wanted me to uh, be an adjunct faculty member at Chapman, to co-teach a course on music publishing. Well, how lucky is that I had just spent 35 years in there, and now I've got this opportunity to teach at the college level something that I did for 35 years. So I did that for a couple of years, and it continued to still lecture there. But there were just other things that I wanted to do, more writing things and more just things that I never got to do around Los Angeles or see or experience. And so I've just kind of let things kind of come my way. I mean, I've spent a lot of time mentoring a lot of young people. I get asked all the time from other publishers or authors, "Hey, can I pay you to edit my manuscript, or can you look at my manuscript and make any kind of suggestions and stuff?" So I get to kind of plan my own thing, how much I want to do, what I want to do, and it's been a really excuse me, a really great journey so far, in that I can take a little bit of all these things that I really love to do and do as much or as little as I want to do. And so that's the creative part. But I've also become more involved in some of the music organizations, on the board of directors of the association, ASMAC, and all those other kinds of things. And so I enjoy all that stuff, and just keeping the kind of the doors open and just seeing what comes through.
Right. And I just for you to know, I personally don't believe in coincidences. There's no such thing in my book
Hmm.
as a coincidence.
Hmm.
You're planning as you're doing what you're doing, you're actually planning your next
Right.
possibilities, and then you choose if you choose to, or if you actually see them, but
Right.
no coincidence.
Yeah, and one of the more fun things is just mentoring young musicians, young people, whatever. I mean, I talk to a lot of people, and I mean, uh, Jim Riley sent me a student from Belmont and said, can he interview you, or whatever? And this person says, can this student talk to you about career opportunities? Can this student? I absolutely love that. So, if anybody's watching and wants some kind of advice, or is looking for just somebody to talk to regarding options or which direction to go, I'm always open and happy to do that. And that's one of the things I think Louis was so great about, is just the art of giving back, the importance of giving back. We all got so much, whatever. You can't just take that and keep it for yourself. You have to be able to share it, and and pass it on to the next generation, and encourage them to do the same. We're all a product of where we came from and who we know, and it's our job to pass that knowledge on and to be as helpful as we can.
No, absolutely, and I'm glad you're saying it that way. I live by the same kind of code. I tell everybody, it's important for you to study hard and be really good at what you do, but your second most important thing is you have to help be part of the success of somebody else or other
Hmm.
people. So in
Right.
order to help other people's success, you have to have something to offer. So it's kind of, it works both ways. You work hard,
Right.
you create something. It's like having creating a great meal. Well, you're not going to eat it all yourself. You're going to
Right.
share it and teach people how this is done, or help other people understand certain things.
Yeah,
Or
and like the eating analogy is a great thing. It's no fun to sit and eat by yourself. Part of the joy is to be able to share that with everybody. It's a conversation, it's a meal, it's talking about other kinds of foods and recipes. It's a chance to just bond and communicate.
Yeah. I mean,
And music is the same way.
yeah.
You know, when drum circles came about and stuff, and that became popular, and all these other things or whatever, it was a communal kind of a thing with drums as the catalyst. But the idea had been around for years. It was just a different way of enjoying it,
Yeah, and
right?
it's nice to be able to do it because it also gives you joy to be able to be helpful, and I say, if you can't be useful, what is the point? If you can't be
Right.
helpful, if you can't be, it's nice to have done what you've done and be able to do it. I mean, as musicians, all the things that we've been fortunate to have been able to do or still be doing,
Mhm.
if you can't push other people into it, not push other people into it, but provide that guiding light or
Mhm.
just the possibility of saying yes, that's possible. you know
Mhm.
no matter what the age. I mean,
Right.
that too, because I went to see Ringo Starr play. Greg Bizinet invited me to his concert when he came by here, as he's done in the past. But just seeing 80, 81 years old and
Yep.
still like in better shape than Dave, you and I
Most
put
people,
together.
yeah. It's true. I mean, and the same with Paul McCartney or a lot of those guys
Mick
who,
Jagger dancing. I mean, wow, that
well,
is
they took good
beautiful.
care of themselves. They eat healthy, they exercise.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of it is, again, going back to what we said before. I mean, loving what you do so much or whatever, that's what keeps you young. It keeps your mind fresh, it keeps it working. And if you enjoy what you do or whatever, you can do it for till you're 80, 81, or however long you want to make that happen.
Or like Arnie Lang, 89. That was just he would have been around a lot longer too. That
Yeah.
was almost 90.
Yeah. It's just, well, yeah. And there's so many people like that. And stuff, but going back to, getting, offering help and opinions and stuff. I mean, the other thing I like to tell people is don't be afraid to ask somebody something. Well, can I ask for this? Can I ask a question? Can I reach out to them and see what this is or that is? Most people will say, "Oh, he'll never write back," or "That person will never write back." I said, "No, most people are actually quite gracious about that. It's very flattering to do that. You have nothing to lose. If you don't hear from them, then fine, nothing was lost. But 9 times out of 10, you're going to get a response, or somebody's going to take the time to pull you aside and answer your question or take an interest in what you're doing. So don't be afraid to ask. The worst thing that can happen is somebody is going to say, no, thank you. And that's it.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. No, we have to we have to direct our own paths. And if you don't ask questions, you don't get answers, right? It's like if you don't show up, you don't get the gig.
Right.
It's like anything else. You have to be present and you have to be a positive force in all of this. And,
Absolutely.
when we do all the COSA things that we've done over the years, I mean, that was part of the underlying current is the sharing, the connecting, the network possibilities that were there, but also on a very high level. And everybody was very approachable. I mean, when I was at university, I was studying in New York. I was going monthly to New York,
Mm,
and I got to hang out with Steve Gadd every time I would go there.
mm,
Uh,
mm,
Alan Schwartzberg, so many musicians who'd invite me to their sessions, like Louie would invite you.
mm.
All the guys in New York used to invite me, and I would just be a fly on the wall, studying with some of them, and others would just watch and learn. So that
What
was
a what a great education we had, right? Because that doesn't happen much anymore because of virtual recording and everything else, unfortunately.
yeah,
But yeah, and you also, I think you do that too with your trips to Cuba. I mean, you don't just teach Cuba here in the States. It's like, no, let's go to the real place and see the real players and study with the real players and be in that environment where that is created. Because, as you know, it's much different to be in your studio and playing those jam sessions or beats or whatever than being out on the streets of Cuba where the senses, the smell, the geography, the cars, the colored building, it all helps to make that statement or to make that music feel more authentic.
Of course, like anything. Going
Yeah,
down to the roots, and also being in conversation with those very people who
absolutely.
have invented it, are proponents of it, are still evolving, and you can have those conversations and actually play and be in that context. It's not the same, not even close.
And you know what? I think those players there or anywhere in the world appreciate the fact that, because America sometimes gets this stigma of, well, we can do anything. We can study with anybody who's studied with somebody and become an expert at it. And it's kind of, egotistical as opposed to admitting or at least acknowledging that the experts are in those respective countries, and we need to actually physically go and study with them or have them come to teach our classes in order to get
Yep.
the complete, well-rounded education in that area of playing music and so on.
In the real deal, it's
Yeah,
important. The real deal, in many ways. Um, you spoke earlier about the drumline stuff, and because when you saw your first inspiration, it just had this flash, this marching band. Now you wrote something for that film, Drumline, right? Did,
yeah,
did you write this co-write the solo that was one of the solos in there?
yeah. The solo that was the audition solo there on the playing field. Now, there's a great story there because we weren't contacted to say, we need you to write a piece for that movie. That piece is the final rudimental solo in the back of Alfred's Drum Method, Book Two. And so, whoever was at 20th Century Fox or whatever, they were looking for solos. I mean, one of their talent things or whatever that says, okay, go find me a rudimental thing that'll work with this scene. I think somebody just must have gone through a bunch of books, whatever, came across that solo and contacted Alfred and said, "Do we have permission to use this solo in a movie that we're doing called Drumline?" And Alfred said, "Sure, of course, because we get a royalty from that and stuff." And what's funny is that it was more than we thought because Sandy and I got movie credit at the end credits of the movie, and I'm still getting royalties from that all over the world because it's constantly played on every cable TV station everywhere. So there was something that you could have never planned for, never thought could happen or whatever, that you ended up writing something that ended up in a book. Somebody found it and used it in a movie that ended up becoming quite successful, especially in the drum industry. And who knew it was
Yeah.
a fluke,
Yes.
an absolute fluke.
Yeah. No, it's amazing, and it always comes back to that thing. I mean, you can stay in your room or you can do things. You can
Right.
study, you can play, you can write, you can pose. I mean, it just goes
Yep.
on and on. So the idea of this, it's ended, it's finished, there's no possibility, there's no hope. It's a nonsense. I mean, there are so many opportunities. All
Right.
you have to do is get up in the morning, get excited about what you do, and just do stuff. And you never know where it's going to land, right?
Yeah, and,
Case
and
in
you and
point.
I you and I have talked about this a lot. I mean, it's not like the days when we were growing up where you could master one instrument, trumpet, clarinet, classical percussion, drum set, and make a pretty good living at that. As time has evolved, we've all had to expand our knowledge. Very few of us can make a living just playing. So you end up writing, or you end up teaching, or you end up doing a lot of other things to kind of pull together um, a career and an income, all in the arts and all dealing with music. But I think as a result, it's forced us to become much more well-rounded as musicians and as people. So we kind of did it out of necessity, but it was a good thing in retrospect.
Yeah, and in many ways, it's just one thing is actually an extension of the other.
Absolutely.
I love to teach, I love to play, and then I
Mhm.
love to play everything. So, which,
Right.
so, and then while you're playing, you have to solve some problems, like technical problems. So I did, and I have these inventions that I've had sitting in drawers for years. I had
Mhm.
prototypes, and one is actually coming out. It's a music stand.
Oh,
But
wonderful.
during
Tell
the
me
whole
about it.
COVID, I said I have some extra time, so it's a music stand that attaches to it's a mallet stand, mallet
Okay.
mallet instrument. So it just goes on the frame. And Manhasset is uh, marketing it soon. It'll be out. We were hoping to have it ready for PIS, but it wasn't quite ready. There's some tweaking to do because we want to make it universal.
Mhm.
And I mean, there are like five versions of this that it's like huge, and all of a sudden it's taking off. And I have like six others of other ideas that have been sitting there, solving my own, I say problems, but things that were always issues, but we never talked about it. And I would just solve it for myself. And now I'm saying, well, let's get those out because they shouldn't sit in a drawer. And they're game
That that
changers.
that's yeah, that's awesome. I mean, there's another side of you, there's another income, there's another facet. It's like Louie Bellson drawing the concept of 2 bass drums in his high school art class or whatever. People were saying, "You're crazy. Why do you need 2 bass drums or whatever?" And look at what the hell happened. I mean,
Yeah,
so you never know. And but even you telling me that story about the Manhasset stand for mallet instruments, it's like, okay, why did it take so long for somebody to do it? I mean, why didn't Claire Musser, when he was inventing the vibraphone and the marimba and everything else, why didn't he come up with a stand that would work for that? I mean,
yes.
right?
No, it's amazing. I mean, on a daily basis with my group repercussion, that became an issue. And that's where the idea originally came to me, um, because we would be moving around so much, and we were
Mhm,
doing 150 concerts a year all over the world, and it became problematic. In the beginning, I said, okay, I have to find a solution because all of a sudden, when you're moving the vibes or the marimba, then you have to move all those stands,
mhm,
and that you have everything precisely where you want it.
mhm.
And that couldn't be.
Yeah,
so,
I mean,
so we solved the problem two ways. I had designed this thing and then put it away. And then secondly, we said, look, we're just going to memorize everything. We're never going to use music stands,
mhm,
period, because it's too much work, too much extra
mhm,
time, too much, all of this. And it's also not so much fun because people don't see you. You always have these things in the way. So we solved that. But then I thought back and I said, that was such a great idea. I have to bring it back and retool it in such a way that it makes more sense than the original idea. And it
mhm.
did. Because now the music just follows you. You move your instrument and the music is always there in the
Right.
same place.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, that's a great lesson right there. Here's another thing we haven't really talked about. Sometimes an idea, whenever you come up with it, may not be whether it's a book idea, an instrument idea, a stand, any kind of thing. The time that you think about that and try and shop it may not be the right opportunity. The timing might not be right, but that doesn't mean that at another time, several years later, when things have changed and things are different, whatever, that idea will now work. And so I think it's a great opportunity to tell people that don't just get discouraged if you get turned down the first time or if something doesn't work. It just may not be the right time or whatever. If you think it's really good and you're confident that you have something, try it 2 years later, 4 years later. The industry changes. People are in different positions. Somebody who didn't like the idea, whatever, somebody else may love it who's now at that company.
Sure.
So, and it goes with submitting a book, a composition, an idea, whether it's a music stand, an instrument, or anything else. If you really believe in it, keep pushing for it until you're at the right moment. All the elements, as you know, have to come together at the right time.
That's right. That's right. I mean, sometimes certain things have to happen first before that
Yep.
thing can be in its lineage and at the proper time.
And in your case with this, Dan, it gave you an opportunity to go back and tweak it based on what others thought of the first reiteration of that. So
Well,
you
no,
had a chance to go back.
in this case, it was a little different because I had never shown it to anybody, and I'd actually forgotten about that and a
Mm,
bunch of other things. It's just that I had some extra time as I was teaching online and doing,
mhm.
many other things that couldn't do. All the traveling I used to do was just
Right,
impossible. I loved it, but there was no physical time. And
right.
suddenly you look and you say, "Wait a second." So now is a moment of really good reflection, quality time that I could spend with this, plus also the legal aspect, part of it,
Yeah,
lawyers and
yeah,
patenting and all of that,
right.
which is really, as you know, a lot of work. I,
Yeah, but
I I
the
learned
guy
that in the book when all the proofreading they just
yeah, and it's funny when somebody is doing their first book or second book or whatever, we all think that, wow, I've read through this thing 15 times or whatever. I had my wife look at it, I had this person look at it. I've tried all the exercises, yeah, with my students and stuff like that. And you send it to somebody and they open a page and boom, the first thing they see is a note missing or or something, whatever, and you go, how can that possibly happen when I looked at it a million times? And the same thing happens with all of us. It's just you get used to it. Your mind kind of fixes something or sees something, and it's not until somebody picks it up cold and it's staring right there in the middle of the page, and you go, "Oh my god, I must have looked at that page 500 times or
Oh,
whatever."
it's brutal. Yeah, and that's a good example because I remember when you sent it back and I said, "Oh my God, it took me 3 years to work on this and get it to this point, and I got to start almost not starting over, but there's a different pair of eyes that are seeing it from a different perspective, from an experienced perspective in that field. It was my first book, so
Right.
obviously I was green. Um, my Yolande, my wife, looked at me and she said, "You really want to write this book?" I said, "Now I'm determined. I went this far. It's got to be done. It got to be out there, and it's got to be done right. So if it takes the
That
rest of my life."
okay, that's really funny because I don't think you and I ever talked about that. You never shared that with me. So when you I'm just curious now, when you got that first draft back from me, whatever, what was your first reaction? Was it like, oh shit, this guy's an idiot. He doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, or I
No, it was
disagree
not. It
with
was not
everything
that
he's
at
saying,
all.
or did you look at it and go, I didn't think of that, or yeah, he's right, or yeah, that's I don't know. What did you think?
Well, here was my first reaction. Here's somebody who has edited obviously hundreds of books, has obviously knows. So I have to respect that. And I'm saying, so in order for this to be done in such a way that it is understood by most people who would buy a book, myself included, this makes sense. But that's a lot of work. How many verifications of words that are misspelt or words that are in the
Mhm,
wrong place or notes that are missing?
mhm,
All these details.
mhm.
And I said, I no, I did say he must be crazy doing this all day long because I would never be able to do that. But but it makes a difference because when it's done, then it's, I wouldn't say perfect because you're always finding things, and I'm still
Yeah.
finding little things, but it's amazing what it takes in that proofreading to get it right. It's a phenomenal work. It's amazing. I mean, and fortunately, you have somebody else who's kind of coaching that process, the
Mhm.
back and forth.
Right.
It was painful in that. So, oh my God, it was like doing a PhD.
Mm.
No, so no, just from that perspective, I said, "Oh my God, what did I get myself into?" And this is going to be a longer process than I thought. But we're in. So
Yeah, and I think once kind of the shock is over or whatever, it's not you realize that it's not a a reflection of the work or the book or anything about it. It's strictly a style kind of thing and a consistency style thing. And it's not to make light of something. It's not to make somebody look bad. It's to make the book better and stronger, not only for the author or the composer, but the company as well. You don't want your customer base to find those kinds of things and write it and say, well, there's a beat missing here. This is misspelled and stuff. So, I think a lot of people end up appreciating, and that's one thing I think Alfred did and does exceptionally well is it's got a group of editors that really go through every single publication that comes through there. There are some publishing companies who don't
Yeah.
take that much time or who just take something that's sent in with the finale files and stuff and they just kind of put it out as is. And I think that was one of the great things about Alfred is that it really went through the ringer and stuff so that it was the very best product that it could possibly be.
Sure. No, and it's important for the long term because there has to be consistency, and also there are some books that, like you said it. I mean, I have hundreds and hundreds of books, and some I just have a real difficulty even understanding still because there's no thread, there's no understanding, and you have to go back. Well, what did that really mean? And
Mhm.
all kinds of structural errors that for the person trying to use the book or learn from the book,
Mhm.
it shouldn't be that laborious.
Or you end up, like a lot of teachers, keeping your original book or whatever, where you've made all your notes and stuff like that. So you don't go out and even buy a clean copy or a new copy because then you'd have to transfer all those notes and stuff to a new one. So you still continue to teach out of the same copy that you've been teaching out of for 40 years.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that's right. But I wanted to ask you now at this point that I mean you've gone on to do using your you know, experience, expertise, and all that you've done. And I mean you're far from hanging up your skates, as they say. But I'm really happy that you're doing all of these new things. Anything else that you want to share that you're doing that just for people to know that how large your experience has become, and you're still expanding it. You haven't stopped there.
yeah, I mean, it just, I just really love what I do and stuff. And the other things that I'm kind of expanding, and, Peter Erskine and I wrote a couple of books. One was called The Drummer's Lifeline, and the other, The Musician's Lifeline. And I think The Musician's Lifeline kind of touched a nice nerve with me or whatever because it's a different kind of book. It's not a drum book or an orchestration book and stuff. It's life lessons and stuff and how to survive and how to treat people and how to work with difficult people. And I'm finding that I'm really liking that kind of thing. So I mean, I can't mention names, but there are a couple of other people who are quite well known that we've talked about writing a similar kind of thing based on their expertise and career and stuff. And I think that those kinds of books are what I really want to do now because now it's taking all this information and working with somebody else on a lot of the pitfalls of the music business and everything else that's not related to learning an instrument that is so vital and so necessary in order to make a living in the music industry nowadays. I'm excited about that.
Yeah. And of course, personality. Some people forget that the personality is an important
Mhm,
element in this. You are not alone. I mean, you're sharing not only knowledge, and you're not
mhm.
just listening to a record. There is your personality involved, and people make a difference, right?
Yeah, without it, there's nothing. And I think continuing to just, I love talking to young people and their enthusiasm, their excitement, and I love to sit down and work with them. And they're overwhelmed. What should I do? How do I write this? How do I do this or whatever? And you give them 2 hours of your time and say, Well, I would start with this, or write something and let me look at it and we'll tweak it. It just makes such a huge difference in their lives and their outlook. And that is my goal here. I mean, I've always been giving back it through my writing or compositions or playing or whatever, but now I'm really enjoying the one-on-one mentorships that I'm having with a lot of different students and or professionals, just trying to get them, off the ground and going. I mean, I love
Beautiful.
it,
Yeah, yeah, beautiful, and
love
that's
it, love it,
that's
love
very
it.
and that's commendable. And certainly, if there's one person who would be in the right saddle, in the right as the right bus driver, would be you, Dave, for sure.
Well, that's so sweet of you to say, and I appreciate that.
And
But
I mean that. I mean that
I,
from
I,
my experience. So
I'm a product of all of you as well. It takes a village, really, and we all learn from each other, and we all support each other. And that's the wonderful thing about the music community, is that for the most part, we all really love each other. We all really support each other and try and help each other. It's not like other types of businesses where it's very cutthroat and very me, me, me. We're actually a great village, aren't we?
yep, yep. And
Yeah,
sometimes I even say to people, you're absolutely right. And I say, it's important that you are there.
right,
Not me, but you. And then of course each one makes up that whole. So
right.
that's important.
And I also think we're in a business too that is not so cutthroat driven, like working at the stock exchange or finance or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of things that are beneficial in music that you don't have to be a professional in order to enjoy or to reap the benefits from.
Mm.
So the idea of having to attain a certain level in order to be able to enjoy or participate in music is something that really is not an issue in our business, because it runs the whole spectrum of enthusiasts, music appreciation, whatever, to those who are actually making a living at it. But you've got all this area in between that's up for grabs, and that there's no right or wrong, and you can get something from it, even if it's just the joy of attending concerts and knowing a little bit more about the music and how it's created on stage to enhance your listening experience.
Yep. Yep.
It all works
Yeah.
at a variety of levels.
Yeah. I mean, the conversation has to be the person delivering and also the person listening. And the person
Right.
listening, the more they understand what the subject matter is, they can be an active listener more than a passive. So
Absolutely.
it's an important thing that we're all part of this process on all sides.
Absolutely.
Right?
I agree. And that's what keeps me going. As long as there's enthusiastic people who are willing to listen, or who are seeking out knowledge or help or whatever, it's just a great feeling to be able to give back.
Yeah. Nice. And those
Yeah.
are great, great last words. I mean, we can go on forever, Dave. Yes. But yeah, but I really want to thank you for being part of this conversation today. And this is going to be documented and archived so we can listen back many times. And thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a great honor to be on your show. It's been a great honor being your friend and working
Uh,
on your projects and stuff. And I look forward to our continued friendship and partnership. I mean, I'm free and willing to look at something that you may be working on, or open to writing
and you'll
something
probably
with you,
receive.
or anything like that. So don't be afraid to reach out and say, hey, why don't we do something together?
Yes,
No,
well, I'm actually working on a couple of other things, and don't be surprised if you get note when some of these things are ready to be looked at.
I look forward to it.
All right. Well, thank you, Dave.
Okay, thank you, Aldo.
Dave Black, thank you, and as I always say, to be continued.